What are we planning for? So according to SACPlan, spatial planning considers people and how they use space. So it's about where people live, where people work, how people move, how people use land. So it's about people. And hopefully it's about happy people. So our problem is, as of December 2017, we have 7.6 billion people on this earth to keep happy. So 384,000 babies are born each day, a net increase of 3 babies each second. 3 babies, 3 babies, 3 babies, 3 babies. And that is what is happening to human population growth. So soon this will be our definition of urban living. And this might be our definition of a nice summer holiday. So we are planning for growing populations. We are planning for houses and basic services, and we are developing every piece of land to accommodate this growing populations. And what is happening? We see our nature disappearing from our cities and from our urban areas. And the problem is this development is irreversible, and it's happening at a very, very fast pace. If we look at our local town, Potchefstroom, this was the reality in 2013, and as you can see, this was the reality in 2017. Can you see our nature disappearing? And it's happening in every neighborhood. We read about it in our papers, we see it in our adjacent areas. We see our children playing in open water channels because this is their definition of open spaces. And then they tell us green is a luxury. We cannot afford to plan for green. There's more pressing needs. We don't need to plan for green. So let's look at it from a different side. We've got the increasing population, and on the other side, we've got decreasing open spaces. We've got increasing developments that leads to increasing carbon footprints. And now we're sitting with decreasing air quality. We've got increasing global temperatures, and we've got a decreasing environmental stability. We're sitting with increasing problems in a variety of sectors, and we see decrease in health. We see an increase in pollution, but we see a decrease in water quality. So the problem is, if your water quality decreases, you increase your poverty. And if you increase your poverty, you decrease your quality of life. So green is not a luxury. They say that, imagine if trees gave free Wi-Fi. We'd all be planting like crazy. It's a pity they only give us the oxygen we use to breathe. We need to understand that green is not a luxury. Green is a necessity. So they call it the green lungs for a reason. But our green spaces is under pressure. Our natural environment is under pressure, and we need to protect it, and we need to plan for it. Similar with water. We think there's a lot of water, but that is the reality of the amount of usable water that we have on this planet. Water is a scarce necessity that we need to plan for. So it was said at the UN conference that the next half century represents our last and our only opportunity to get urbanization right. So if planning is about people and how they use space, then planning should be about water. Planning should be about our green infrastructure and our green spaces. Planning should be about our carbon footprint and estimating our carbon footprint. And ultimately, it should be about quantifying our impact and seeing our impact on our environment. So spatial planning should really understand the ripple effect of our land use decisions. And we should come to a point where we can plan and make informed decisions and do the right forward planning. So it's about understanding the inside, but seeing the bigger picture. So if we are planning for people and for happy people, let's give them open spaces. Let's give the children spaces to play. Let's give them spaces to run and recreate. Let's give them good quality water. Let's give them oxygen. And let's bring nature back into our cities. Let's reconnect our people with our open areas and green spaces. So in this layout, this urban planner realized the value of green spaces and of nature, and he planned and he protected this open area. And as a result, he provided a lot of superpowers to this area. So according to literature, there's a lot of values that comes from open spaces that's captured in environmental, social, and economic benefits. And you are welcome to email me for all the literature stating these elements. We need to realize that there's important values within this green and within our natural open areas. And if you still don't agree, if you really think the environment is less important than the economy, try holding your breath while you count your money. Because in the end, you guys decide what we are planning for. Thank you.
In the third year of my undergraduate studies, we had a module, Urban Ecology, and it was here where we were first introduced to green infrastructure, or GI. And it was also during this time where I became completely intrigued and possibly slightly infatuated with what I consider to be the life-changing magic that is GI. So much so that this was the theme of my master's thesis. With my research on GI, there were a few questions I desperately wanted to answer, hence the leafy green question mark on the screen behind me. The first and possibly most important question was what? What is it, and how does it fit into spatial planning? I found that GI means so many things to so many different people, and that some might see it simply as roofs and rain gardens, while others might see it as an interconnected network of green systems. I also found that within spatial planning, unfortunately, there is no concise definition as to what GI is. And so many people have written so much about it that I actually had to formulate my own definition. What I came up with was that GI holds all natural and man-made ecological systems, which not only integrate the built environment and ecosystem services with resilient landscapes, but also support all ecological, economic, and human interests, while maintaining and promoting connectivity, also while improving the quality of the environment. Once I was informed and possibly overexcited about what GI was, I looked around me and realized that I don't see much of it, which is sad because it holds so many benefits. I then asked some planners, why isn't it used more? And I realized that they weren't educated on it as I was. And they weren't as fortunate enough to know as much about it as I did. The only way to get people interested and excited about something is to tell them, to educate them. So the best way to excite planners on GI and to aid them in using it more, so that built environments can benefit from it, is to educate them. So, to put it very simply, GI could very well be, in my completely biased opinion, the life-changing magic that we need in our ever-changing environment. And it might well hold solutions to the problems that we face in the world we live in now. And since knowledge is power, and it's of the utmost importance that all prospective planners be educated and equipped and empowered to use all the magic we can get our hands on, since the best way to plan the future, or to predict the future, is to plan it.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here today. This research was sponsored by the National Research Foundation. Thank you. So sustainability is one of the most important concepts in modern society. We all know that we have surpassed the Earth's ability to sustain us, risking our social and economic well-being and threatening our own existence. Our cities are polluted, there's major poverty and hunger, and in a large part of the world, the living conditions is not up to standard. This search to create a sustainable city is not new. At first, the ideas were very utopias in the early 19th century, where a lot of the theorists, such as Ebenezer Howard and Le Corbusier, suggested that we just turn our back on existing cities and build new ones. But of course, that is not realistic. We have to deal with cities as we find them. So then the theorists believed that we just need space. So they planned cities with very low density, and that led to a lot of urban sprawl and a loss in social interaction. So since the 1970s, we went back to planning compact mixed-use cities, but we still have this pressing urban issues such as environmental pollution. And recently they discovered that natural elements in cities such as vegetation, like street trees, provide solutions to these environmental, social and economic problems. For example, they installed rooftop gardens, which helps to combat the greenhouse effect and also provides food security for the urban poor. Thus, I want to leave you with this question. Shouldn't we stop trying to solve man-made problems with man-made solutions, utilize what we have and go back to nature? Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nikita Greiling, and I'm currently busy with my master's degree in urban and regional planning at the Noordwes-universiteit. Thank you all for being here today. Now, looking at the slide that I made for today's presentation, you all might think that I am going to talk about space. Well, technically, if you thought so, you are correct. But first, who can tell me, how do you organize a space party? You plan it. Pun intended. Now, much like planning a party, as we university students love to do, urban and regional planners have to plan for the transformation of the physical space around us. But in planning the physical space around us, it is important to take into consideration that there might be a social aspect linked to the transformation of space. So when urban and regional planners think about transforming the physical space around us, one question will always pop to mind. Will this be sustainable? And the two most common things to think about then is, will it be economically sustainable? Will the transformation of space be environmentally sustainable? But what we often do not think about is the social aspect to sustainability. And yet, we plan for people. So the question that we also should be asking is, will it be socially sustainable? This got me thinking, wow, what an interesting research topic. Therefore, my research is about the transformation of space and how it possibly might enhance social sustainability in the Kalini Forward project in South Africa. The Kalini Forward project is my case study, and this specific area was selected by the South Africa Day Group as a potential area where diverse spatial planning practices might be incorporated to renovate and replan this small South African town. It was intended as a quick space transformation project, planned between April 2018 and August 2018. My research thus investigated whether community perspectives have changed over time as a result of transforming physical space in the Kalini Forward project. The results of this research assisted in answering the question of, can the transformation of space actually enhance the social sustainability in the Kalini Forward project, and then later on in South Africa as well? This quick transformation project and the research conducted on it might set an example for other South African towns and to eventually enhance the overall social sustainability in our country. And hopefully also, again, set an example for other countries in the world. Big things often have small beginnings. And that is why I leave you with this quote. To change life, we must first change space. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So, I would like to know, who of you have seen the movie District 9 before? Some of you have. For those of you who haven't, some of you might be a little bit young, here's a quick summary of the movie. It's a movie about aliens that move to Johannesburg and get stranded above Johannesburg. And then somehow the South African government discovered the aliens very malnutritioned in this alien ship. And then they have to host them somewhere, and then they confine them to a place they call District 9. And all went well until they had some contact with the locals, and there was an unrest, and then they had to relocate the aliens. And then all havoc broke loose. So I would like you to look at a few pictures from the movie at the back of the screen. I hope some of you will be able to see. So I've been very nice. I brought you some pictures with, so I would like you to see if you recognize anything in these pictures that look a little bit familiar to you. I hope the aliens don't look that familiar to you. This is a picture from the top of District 9, where the aliens lived, and then the next picture indicates how they kept them walled inside and without having contact with the locals. And then I brought some other pictures with, which is pictures of South Africa, current reality of South Africa. And I want you to remember what you've just seen in District 9, and then see if you see any similarities. This is Khayelitsha in Cape Town. Another picture of Khayelitsha. This is the Kibera slum in Kenya. Also the Kibera slum. And this is a picture that was recently taken in, I think it was April month of this year, where they did a relocation in PE. And one of the fathers protested against this relocation and threatened to throw his small little daughter off the roof of his shack. And in the end, he did that. Fortunately, this picture has a happy ending because there was a policeman at the bottom that caught this child. So my question to you today is, did District 9 survive in South Africa? So are we alienating our informal settlements in the way that we are planning for them? So the question might come up, so what? Why are we talking about informal settlements? Everybody is buzzing about slum conditions and informal settlements, and the answer lies in this map. It indicates that the urbanization tempo currently in the world will increase within the next 40 years. But in Africa, you'll see all the orange and red parts is 2 times or 5 times the current urban population. So it means that everything that you know currently as urban will double in size at least in Africa, or in some places 5-fold the amount that it is. So you can still ask, so what? Europe also went through an urbanization process, but it took Europe 110 years to go from 15% to 40% urbanized. It took Africa only 60 years, which is twice as fast. Unfortunately, this is the reality, and it leaves us with slum conditions because it's the poorest people moving to the cities. So in sub-Saharan Africa currently, about 55 to 60% of people are living in slum conditions. This means if you are sitting here and you're not living in slum conditions, you're one of the 40% few selected people not living in a slum area in Africa. This will obviously worsen as time goes by. So the reality check for urban planners is you are going to plan for informal settlements within the next few years of your life. So if you're young and you're just starting out as a planner, this will be your reality. So what do we do about this as urban planners? Should we do something about it? I get mostly 3 types of reactions. The one is ignorance or despondency, people saying, no, we can't do anything about this. The other planners say, let's just revert to old traditional ways of plan making, stuff that has worked before, and quick fixes, lots and lots of RDP housing provided. And then the third one is, some people have this hero complex saying, I'm going to change the world and I'll be the hero of this poor little informal settlement. So it doesn't matter where you are in this whole range of thinking, but what I would like to put to you is that we are all prejudiced when we look at informal settlements. We see them with some kind of a pejorative connotation to the word slum or informality. And if we don't like what we see, it's difficult to plan in a nice way for what we are seeing. So Victor Hugo in the movie or in the book Les Miserables said this a long time ago. He said, have no fear of robbers or murderers. They are external dangers. We should fear ourselves because prejudices are the real robbers and vices the real murderers. So what have I seen as I moved through informal settlements? I don't have the answers, but what I have seen is that if we kind of lose our prejudice glasses, we see other solutions that the informal residents already provide. Some of the examples are on screen. They provide, to a certain extent, adequate shelter. There are lots of examples where people make their own bricks. They try to make their own charcoal and providing services for themselves. They have sometimes even created some kind of a toilet facility. Other examples include an economic base created by women cultivating all kinds of vegetables, even medical services. I would not personally attend this doctor, but there are some medical services. They've got very great social interaction in open spaces, sometimes I think even better than in the formal urban areas. And I've even seen some recycling projects in the informal settlements. So they do have some answers. The question is, what should we do as planners? Now, there are lots of practical examples where people started trying out with some practical solutions. But I think before we get to that, we need to change our way of thinking. And I call this the Sistine Chapel of planning. And it's a reference to Michelangelo. When they asked him to paint the Sistine Chapel, he said, no, it's completely impossible. No man can do this. The task is just too big. And I think we feel kind of the same when we stand and look at our informal settlements. So another wise guy with the name of Paul Davidoff said in the 1960s already that the planner should be an advocate for the community that he plans for. That means that you have a very, very large responsibility as a planner to be the voice for the community that you plan for, to know their needs, and to be the link up between them from the bottom up to the top-down authorities who want certain development to take place. A very important role. So if you look at this picture of the Sistine Chapel, the creation of Adam, you'll see there's a legend going on that says when God created the earth, he had the goddess of wisdom, Sophia, in his arm, which means he didn't create without wisdom. He created everything in wisdom. And I think we need a new planning philosophy, which means if you break the word philosophy down, it means philos, which is love, and sophos, which is reference to the goddess of wisdom, Sophia. It's a love of wisdom. And I think our new generation of planners need to be wise as we think of solutions for the informal settlement. So is there a solution? I believe so. I think there's a perfect touch if we realize our very sensitive role as this advocate for the communities that we are planning for. If we start realizing that, we'll see different solutions than we currently have. So how do we not alienate our communities? If the planners see their role as a wise co-producer of solutions, co-producing with the communities, creating solutions that would be beneficial to both the planners and to the community, we might get to better circumstances for our informal settlements. This means that we have to be the linker between the bottom up and the top down, that we have to be very flexible and adaptive in the way that we plan. And lastly, that we should lose our superhero complex and start planning from a very humble perspective. I would like to end with this quote saying that there's always, where there's breath, there is hope. So there's always hope. And I do hope that we create a new generation of very wise and hopeful planners. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Johannes Chabalala. I'm a master's student in urban and regional planning. My topic is the Game of Thrones in Vredefort, South Africa. Now, imagine yourself living here all your life, and all of a sudden, a developer comes and wants to develop a residential estate similar to that of residential high-density development. Now, what are you going to do? So many lives are going to be affected. This development can affect you in so many ways. Now, this comes to the issue of public participation. In most cases, most developers, when they develop, they don't care of what the public would want to say. They don't care whether the public is happy or not. They don't use a bottom-up approach. Instead, they resort to a top-down approach. Now, in the Vredefort Dome, this is one of the similar situations which happened a long time ago. Vredefort Dome is one area where developers came and developed only to find in the long run this decision will come back and haunt them. Now, they are sitting with a situation whereby there is a conflict in terms of the land use, or a conflict about whether the land should be used for that purpose or for another purpose. Now, in as much as public participation is important in the sense that it is regarded as a powerful tool which can be used to ensure that the public is actively involved in the decision-making processes which affects their lives. Now, what you need to bring into your attention as you develop is the fact that public participation is a tool that has to be used together with the public and not for the public. What most town planners do, they tend to plan for the public and not with the public. The main idea in public participation is the fact that as a town planner, you need to plan with the people. Thus, a bottom approach is so crucial in a case like this. Now, Vredefort Dome is one of the 3 World Heritage Sites in South Africa. Now, what is important with this World Heritage Site is that it is situated between 3 provinces, which is the Free State, the Northwest, and the Gauteng province. Now, each one of these provinces wants a piece of cake. Thus, the whole conflict between who is in charge of the dome. Now, despite its importance and necessity, public participation is much more complex than mere following of legal processes. However, the Constitution of South Africa recognizes public participation as one of the legal requirements for spatial planning in South Africa. Now, the complexity of public participation in spatial planning needs to be unraveled, as it is a mysterious game of thrones amongst different stakeholders. Now, my study focuses on the case of Vredefort Dome as one of many similar examples where taking part in public consultation is timely and not necessarily a rewarding process. Thank you very much.
Good day, everybody. I'm an urban ecologist working very closely with urban planners, and I would like to share some ideas with you about a very exciting discipline within planning, and that is green infrastructure planning. There are so many different definitions of green infrastructure. I like the one that's more from an ecological point of view, where it's regarded as an interconnected network of urban open spaces, green urban open spaces, in other words, where plants occur. And that will include natural areas, that is your mountains, your rivers, the ocean, woodlands, grasslands, and so forth, but also the man-made or anthropogenic open spaces like parks, gardens, green roofs, rain gardens, agricultural activities, and so forth. But what is important is all these open spaces should fulfill specific ecosystem services. Now, to understand this concept of ecosystem services, you must realize that cities are ecosystems. And more specifically, they are complex social ecological systems with 2 very important components: the human social system on the one side and the natural system on the other side. The natural system have very, very important ecosystem functions which can be perceived as positive aspects by human beings. And many of these aspects can actually improve human health and well-being. And there are quite a lot of examples that you can see behind me. For example, provisioning services such as food, fresh water, medicinal resources. Also regulating services such as carbon dioxide sequestration by plants for the process of photosynthesis. The fact that wetlands can actually purify water. Then also important habitat or supporting services. Many open spaces can act as refuge for a variety of organisms. And then lastly, the cultural services that the planners know very well of, things like sense of place, also aesthetics, recreation, and all those different aspects. So very important, open spaces have all these different urban ecosystem services, and they provide it for free. You don't have to pay for it at all. Now the question is, why do we use such a term as green infrastructure? That is quite easy to answer. That is to align and also put it on par with grey infrastructure. So we have green infrastructure fulfilling the same services than grey infrastructure, but without any cost or with very low cost. I would like to give you one example. The municipality of Kampala in Uganda, they wanted to drain the Nakivubu swamps for agricultural activities. But luckily, they also did a very complete study, and this study has shown that if they want to do that, they need to develop very, very intense sewage treatment facilities with a lot of maintenance, very, very expensive. So they opted for keeping the green because they only had to restore some of the wetlands. So here you have the green on one side with free services or very low services, and you have the grey on the other side with very expensive services. Which one will you choose? That is a no-brainer to most of us. I would like to just share a couple of principles on GI planning with you. The first one is multifunctionality. If you look at that specific park, I'm sure you will see it's quite pretty. It's aesthetically pleasing. You can use it for recreation, but if you zoom in on the plants, you will see there are quite a variety of plants. So different habitats for different organisms. If you look at the trees, you know that they can also sequester carbon dioxide. They can mitigate the urban heat island. And I can go on and on and on with lots of other ecosystem services that can be provided by that park. But what about areas, green areas such as sport facilities, which were developed for only one function, like a rugby field, Ellis Park, for example. I don't know what the new name is. Can it also fulfill different functions? Yes. With clever planning and clever design, you can do that. All right, and that will you need to look at specific examples. Let's say, for example, green stormwater management practices. What you can do is to harvest the rainwater from the roofs. You can use pervious paving in the parking areas. And what you can do in the process, you can keep the water in the system, or you can replenish the groundwater. Another important principle is the one of connectivity. All the green areas and also the blue areas need to be connected. I would like to give you 3 examples. Isn't that a beautiful picture of a closed canopy street, trees? If they are connected to each other, they have lots of different ecosystem services, for example, mitigating the urban heat island effect. What you can also do is to develop green bridges over busy highways so that it can be used as dispersal corridors for animals. And then the last one is if you can take water from individual homes and it can be collected, it can be purified by an interconnected system of rain gardens and bioswales. And then the last principle is the one of integration. You need to integrate the grey with the green. We don't want the grey because the grey is ugly, it is hot, it is impervious, it is sterile. So replace them, the green, the grey with the green. For example, green roofs, as you can see there, so-called ecoducts, a very interesting ecoduct bridge in Stockholm in Sweden, green walls. And then also, what you can also do is to replace the traditional stormwater drains on the right-hand side with rain gardens and bioswales, which can slow the flow of rain and also purify the water in the process. I'm sure listening to me, some of the planners might say, what are you talking about, you greenie you? We are specialists. We are not jack of all trades. And my answer to you will be exactly. Remember that GI planning is interdisciplinary. All right, lots of other disciplines are involved. Expertise from ecologists, for example, from architects, from engineers, from landscape architects, from hydrologists. Ecologists are extremely important because they study the interactions. They study the patterns and the processes of the biodiversity and ecosystem services in and around cities. But what is really very important, ladies and gentlemen, is the urban planners must lead the way. Otherwise, GI planning will never happen. That's one aspect. Another important aspect is that the planners, together with the other stakeholders, must engage in strategic thinking. Now, there are different ways in which you can think strategically. It depends on quite a lot of aspects. What is your aim of planning? What are the drivers of change, and so forth? One aspect that is important is protective, so-called protective strategies. That is when there are still large green areas intact, natural areas intact, then you must, that is before development of course, then you must proactively protect those areas, and that is where the ecologists come in very handy with all their knowledge. Then you also have the so-called defensive strategies. That is when you have fragmented natural areas and you need to defend those areas from further development. That is after development, and you have to be reactive. Then we have offensive strategies. Offensive strategies is in disturbed areas where you start with engineering practices and restoration practices, and in none of the other strategies you had to do that. And you must do that to optimize the ecosystem services which are fulfilled by those specific green areas. And then the last one, the opportunistic strategies, those are areas with no function at all, but with the possibility, with the opportunity to have specific functions. But then you must think cleverly, you must be innovative, to also include quite a lot of other disciplines so that in the process you can develop green roofs, rain gardens, constructed wetlands, and so forth. And my last message for you, and I'm sure you know what it will be. What is it? It will never happen if the planners don't lead the way. I thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fortune Mangara. I'm a PhD candidate in urban and regional planning. My topic is entitled Planning for Cities in Transition, Urban Conservation and Urban Development in Potchefstroom as a case study. The competition among cities to become world-class cities by the year 2050 has caused a lot of developmental pressure among cities in Africa as well as Asia. According to the United Nations 2015, it mentioned that by the year 2050, half of the world's urban population will be living in urban areas, and that will create a lot of pressure on existing urban infrastructure. I have decided to take a look at built environmental heritage resources as they give the city's identity. There is no way we can develop our cities while we don't look at the history of our cities. In the previous years, we have seen that the policies and legislation which have governed urban conservation as well as urban development, they have been running in parallel, such that there has been a discourse between these two disciplines, and we cannot develop further while forgetting urban conservation. Therefore, these two disciplines, they need to work hand in hand. In 2015, the United Nations put forward the Sustainable Development Goals, mentioning the importance of these built heritage in resources. SDG number 11, target 4, clearly mentioned that there is need to protect our heritage so as for us to have sustainable cities. I looked at Potchefstroom as my case study because it is one of the oldest towns in the Northwest province. Therefore, it is rich in built environmental heritage resources. Also, due to the resource base, such as the university, we have seen a lot of influx of people, a lot of migrants, and we have also seen a lot of urban development going on in Potchefstroom. Also, there have been a lot of changes in land use, which has triggered a lot of urban decay, therefore causing a transition. If you take a closer look at one of the oldest neighborhoods in Potchefstroom, the Bout area, you can see that it is slowly moving from a historical to a contemporary landscape. Therefore, I want to use spatial planning as a tool for integrating urban conservation as well as urban development with specific reference to built environmental heritage resources. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Louis Lateghan, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. So there is a definite shift globally towards recognizing and accepting informality, moving further away from the eradication rhetoric of the past. Yet the image of the informal as that which is illegal, undesirable, and that which mars modern development ideals also remains firmly ingrained. Against this backdrop, I investigate a specific sector of South Africa's informal housing market, in the informal backyard rental sector. Informal backyard rentals, as those informal structures commonly found behind the formal dwellings produced via the state's housing subsidies, have been a part of South Africa's housing landscape for decades, and all indicators suggest that numbers will escalate in the future. So, apart from providing access to affordable rental accommodation, and apart from sustained growth, why should we support them? Well, we can answer these questions based on four main principles, based on the continued support for sustainable development, both locally and internationally. Whereas specific negative impacts and concerns related to informal backyard renting are legitimate and have been noted elsewhere, today the focus falls squarely on the positives. Firstly, spatially, informal backyard rentals increase population and dwelling unit densities substantially, thus absorbing a large number of people who would otherwise turn to informal settlements on the urban periphery, thereby compacting the city and opposing the urban sprawl that has continued to typify development in post-apartheid South Africa. Secondly, environmentally, informal backyard rentals reduce the urban footprint and discourage further informal encroachment onto areas of natural or agricultural value. The sector also promotes recycling and resource efficiency through informal construction practices and livelihoods based on sharing. Thirdly, economically, informal backyard rentals provide many landlords with much-needed supplementary income to meet the expenses related to owning a home, for many presenting the only means to make home ownership feasible. The sector also provides tenants with access to affordable rental accommodation, often with access to basic services, in a housing system that neglects the needs of low-income renters to a large extent. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, socially, informal backyard rentals are often provided by landlords out of civic duty or a sense of compassion to house the otherwise destitute, who may include local or foreign-born migrants or members of their own families. thus extending social networks, fostering social cohesion, and building social capital, often through multi-generational connections in conditions of very limited conflict. So in conclusion, informal backyard rentals may contribute substantially towards the sustainability of the South African township. The sector also embodies the concept of housing co-production and provides fertile researching opportunities to further explore the interface between the global north and global south. We as scholars are tasked with furthering the agenda of recognition and support towards improved policy outcomes capable of delivering mechanisms to improve quality of life for landlords, tenants, and all others in the South African city. Thank you.